well, good morning. It's going to be a bit challenging in a room this size. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about the gift of dyslexia. I've been involved with dyslexia for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm passionate about helping people who are dyslexic or have dyslexic tendencies. And I do believe it's something that can be very positive, as well as obviously can be a challenge in life as well. So the talk I want to do today is going to be very interactive, because that's a good way to learn. It's more fun. And because there's so many of you, you might not all get a chance to have a go, and I'm really sorry about that. But I hope you all feel you're taking part. So I've actually got 3 gifts here. Okay, 3 different gifts to unwrap. And I need your help. So who likes unwrapping gifts?
I do.
Would you like to start then?
I'm female, it's part of my culture, right?
It's almost a little handbag, isn't it?
What do I just she said handbag.
Oh, okay.
Handbag, she said handbag, I want one.
Right, the idea is I'd like to pass this round, and then when you take one of the pieces of paper, if you could read it, and I'll explain what it's about in a moment. So, thank you.
Keira Knightley.
Okay. Robert, yes. If you'd like to take part.
Hands up if you.
Andy Warhol.
Right.
How
appropriate.
Fantastically appropriate for Robert.
No, I'm married.
This is being recorded, so...
Does that make a difference with Keira Knightley?
Brian Conley.
Anyone at this table like
is
that?
that?
Sorry. Go on, there's a common theme here. If anyone guessed what it is yet?
Yeah. They're all dyslexic.
Oh, so clever. Duchess of York.
The Duchess of Portland.
Jamie Oliver.
That's an obvious one.
Roald Dahl.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Got to keep track of this now.
Just the one.
Reading.
Steve Jobs.
Really?
Yeah.
Bill Gates.
Good. Any more on that one?
Lucky Dick. Joe Malone.
Who's that?
Oh,
No? I'll start with you next time. Now, can we be really clever and retrace our steps and put them back in reverse? Is that going to work for people?
Yes.
That's what I remember. Okay, so any surprises there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs and
So, would you say that they've made a success of themselves in their lives?
Yeah.
They're perhaps quite talented?
Yeah.
You've got some over there.
Possibly.
Any more, thank you.
Bill Gates.
Yeah, so earned quite a bit of money, you know, done stuff. Quite a lot of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs are dyslexic, so there you go. When I did this talk once before, at the end of it, somebody said to me, you made me wish I was dyslexic, so I'm trying to put the positives. Right, now I have another package here. Andrew, shall I start with you? Same again, if you wouldn't mind. Let's read it out. Can everybody hear, by the way?
Yeah.
Perceptive.
Perceptive.
Good job, I'm not too dyslexic.
Well, there is that, yeah.
Thinking pictures, not words.
Thinking pictures, not words.
More curious than average.
More curious than average.
Not hyperactive.
Intuitive.
Intuitive, another easy one to spell.
Global thinking.
Global thinking. Let's take over the world. No.
Creative.
Creative.
Imaginative.
Imaginative.
That's
That's
the
it.
last one.
Right, we go back. So, what do you think of those then?
Those all
characteristics of
Traits
dyslexic
of
people.
dyslexic. So if you haven't got them, then tough really.
Not
That doesn't mean if you have them that you are dyslexic necessarily. But I think that's quite a nice package really. Okay. Somebody gave a definition of dyslexia as being a unique blend of talents and difficulties. And I think that's a really nice definition. So we've looked at some of the successful people, okay? We've looked at some of the talents, and we're going to look in a moment at some of the difficulties, which is what people tend to focus on when they talk about dyslexia. But I think there's actually a lot to celebrate in dyslexia, because actually if you've got some of these, you can do quite a lot with yourself in your life. It's my gift. Thank you. All right, now the last one, now this table. Would you like to have a go here? I'm sure some people here like to unpack some lessons. Charlie, want to start? You don't want to. We've probably done this before, haven't you?
Yes.
You know the answer.
Doesn't mean I can read it. Poor working memory.
Poor working memory. Reading.
Mixing up dates and times.
Mixing up dates and times.
Handwriting.
Handwriting.
Spelling.
Spelling.
Following instructions.
Following instructions.
You've had a man to do that.
Get ideas down on paper.
Getting ideas down on paper.
Sequencing.
Sequencing. Is that the last one?
It is.
Yeah. Okay, reverse. Okay, some of the difficulties there. You might relate to some of these, and sometimes people think, well, maybe I'm dyslexic. I think probably most of us have some sort of dyslexic tendencies, but that doesn't make us dyslexic. Because dyslexia is actually a whole spectrum of symptoms and abilities. So the classic ones are the reading and the spelling. That's what people tend to think about when they think dyslexia, don't they? And the word dyslexia actually comes from the Greek, so quick lesson in Greek here. Dys, which means difficulty, and lexia, which means words. But I've unpacked all these other things in the gift, all the positives, and now all the negatives, so you can see there's actually a lot more than just the area around reading and writing. Getting ideas down on paper is a classic one. You can have someone who's very good at doing the presentation, very good with the people side of things, but they just can't funnel their ideas down onto a piece of paper. One of the positives was thinking in pictures. They're often global thinking. They can get the whole picture, they can see things visually. Symbols are actually very narrow. You've got to take a whole word and convert it down into these little symbols, sequence them, put them in the right way, remember what the letter and the sound, how they correspond, and then write it down or type it. So it's actually you're asking the brain to do quite a lot. Now all of us, I would imagine, do that pretty much automatically, but for somebody who's dyslexic, some of that processing is not automatic. Now this is a huge topic, and time has sort of run away with us a bit, so again, if you want to know more, do talk to me later. Just a couple of things to mention that maybe you're not sure about. The sequencing, what do you understand by sequencing, anybody?
Is that the chronological way in which you process?
Yeah, so step by step. So
logical sequencing step by step.
Yeah. So for example, you give someone 3 instructions to do, and maybe they only remember the first one, okay? Because or the first 2, they can't do 3 or 4. Maybe someone thinking, yeah, I'm like that. Okay. As you get older, it goes that way. That's often tied up with working memory, which Charlie mentioned. And working memory is a little bit different to short-term memory. So working memory is where you're given some new information, maybe some random information, and you have to process it. For example, someone gives you a telephone number or an account number or something, and they rattle it off with about 10-15 digits, or a license key we were talking about over coffee. You've got to type in a great long license key. If you've got poor working memory, or even if you haven't, it's a big ask to be given all these characters and have to deal with it. People have described working memory as like a shelf. So if you have a shelf that can contain 3 items, and you're being given 6 characters, random characters you've never heard before, you've got to listen to them, absorb them, and then put them on the shelf. If your shelf can only hold 3 characters, what's going to happen to the other, however many it was, because I've really forgotten what I was saying. Okay. One of the tests I do, and I do assessments, is I give people a sequence of numbers, and they're random numbers, and I start off with 2 in a row, and I go up to, I think it's 6 or 7 in a row. Sometimes people, I just say it to them, and they have to repeat it back. Sometimes people can manage that quite well, sometimes they struggle. Then the real test is I give them, and they have to send in reverse order. So I say 2, 5, they then have to say 5, 2, and then it goes up and increases. All the children, adults that I assess at my centre, the Children's IDL Centre, they all have working memory issues. It just comes with the package. and some of them can only manage 2 or 3, and not even that. They just cannot do it. And a lot of the tasks around encoding and decoding words, you need your working memory until it becomes automatic. So it's a bit of a double whammy, really. It is a huge topic. I'm aware that time has sort of run away now. I just want a chance for perhaps a couple of questions. So thank you for participating. I hope you enjoyed it.
Very
Any
much.
quick questions before we finish?
Just like to say that when you were doing a bit about the talents, that kind of almost brought a tear to my eye, because my second son's dyslexic, and that almost described him in terms of, you know, he's incredibly creative and perceptive and really thinks visually in pictures, but then can't sequence things, can't take more than 1 or 2 instructions at a time, and you have to be incredibly patient. Yes. The fact that he's a teenager doesn't help. You have to be quite patient, thinking it's not because he's a boy and he's a teenager, it's because he can't remember instructions and he can't remember the order of things. But it was nice to hear all the positives, because the school and everybody else focuses on all the negatives.
Yeah, thank you. That's obviously confirmed all the stuff I've been saying in a beautiful way. Thank you.
Karina, when you talk about the sequencing, you say that you use numbers. It's a thinly veiled secret about me that I failed my maths O-level twice with an unclassified, you know, and my father was a nuclear physicist. I am afraid of numbers. If you did that sequencing with numbers with me, I think I would find it far more difficult than if you did it with letters. Is that?
Well, that was something, if I was doing the second assessment for you, I'd be happy to change it around.
Yeah,
I did have
okay.
somebody recently who was really good around numbers, and I did have a sense that maybe if I did it with letters, he might find it harder.
Sure.
So yes, there's a lot
Yeah.
to all this. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that always
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What is the levels of dyslexia in our society?
Yeah.
And is that an increasing trend or decreasing trend?
Well, they reckon it's 10% of the population.
Right.
So some people reckon it's as high as 20%. I think we all have aspects of it. I think there's so much, we're bombarded with so much information that I think we can exhibit dyslexic type symptoms in the sense of the information overload. Because for me it's actually more about how you process information. So I think we can all struggle in a way that could appear to be a bit dyslexic, but that doesn't mean we're dyslexic. So it may seem to be getting worse. Certainly the schools are picking it up more, and it's become more of a political agenda, but there's lots more can be done about it. And that's why I welcome the chance to come to talks like this, to hopefully raise people's awareness. So hopefully you'll realise, watch, that reminds me of so-and-so, or maybe me, or I'm working with someone with a business client. Think about the issues that could be a problem to them, as well as...
Is it a genetic disposition?
Can be, yes.
To what extent is it bound up with culture and the language we use to communicate? Because I've heard, for example, that Asian children are a lot better at mathematics because the way they speak and structure numbers enables them to think faster.
Again, that's a sort of a huge question to unpack. Certainly English, with its spelling, which is not always phonetic, is an issue. And so English-speaking countries, dyslexia tends to be a problem. They do have it in places like China and Japan, I've heard, but it actually uses a different part of the brain because they use these logograms, you use characters, so it exhibits in different ways. But some countries it is more prevalent because it's to do with what you're actually encoding and decoding.
I just want to say, my daughter was written off as being fit, and she ended up apparently with dyslexia, and 20 years ago nobody was listening, nobody was supporting, and it was only up to us to say, you're not stupid, come on, we'll find a way, well, you're not stupid, and she's turned out alright actually in her late 20s, she's turned out to be really quite successful, but she's got no support, so whatever you're doing now I really think is fantastic, because these are the kids that are being written off at school now.
Absolutely.
And they're not stupid, you know they're not stupid, you just can't put your finger on it, so well done.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. My time is up, and thank you very much for your great audience. Thank
Very
you.
much.
And Karina's got